It's the Mueller report. We're on page 137. This is the part where they're talking about Paul Manafort's association with Konstantin Kilimnik and Oleg Deripaska. Deripaska being the Ukrainian-Russian oligarch who is building the steel and aluminum factory in Kentucky to help Mitch McConnell get reelected in 2020. Manafort has alleged to the office, that's the Mueller office, that he was willing to brief Deripaska, this is the guy who's helping out Mitch McConnell, only on public campaign matters, and gave an example, why Trump selected Mike Pence as the vice presidential running mate. Manafort said he never gave Deripaska a briefing. Manafort noted that if Trump won, Deripaska would want to use Manafort to advance whatever interest Deripaska had in the United States and elsewhere. Page 138. Paul Manafort's two campaign period meetings with Konstantin Kilimnik in the United States is the subtitle here. Manafort twice met with Kilimnik in person during the campaign period, once in May and again in August of 2016. The first meeting took place on May 7, 2016 in New York City. In the days leading to that meeting, Kilimnik had been working to gather information about the political situation in Ukraine. That included information gleaned from a trip the former Party of Regions official Yuri Boyko had recently taken to Moscow, a trip that likely included meetings between Boyko and high-ranking Russian officials. Kilimnik then traveled to Washington, D.C. on or about May 5, 2016. While in Washington, Kilimnik had prearranged meetings with State Department employees. Late on the afternoon of May 6th, Gates arranged for Kilimnik to take a 3 a.m. train to meet Manafort in New York for breakfast on May 7th. According to Manafort, during the meeting, he and Kilimnik talked about events in Ukraine, and Manafort briefed Kilimnik on the Trump campaign, expecting Kilimnik to pass the information back to individuals in Ukraine and elsewhere. Manafort stated that opposition bloc members recognized Manafort's position on the campaign was an opportunity, but Kilimnik did not ask for anything. Kilimnik spoke about a plan of Boyko to boost election participation in the eastern zone of Ukraine, which was the base for the opposition bloc. Kilimnik returned to Washington, D.C. right after the meeting with Manafort. The opposition bloc is the political entity in eastern Ukraine that's aligned with Russia. Manafort met with Kilimnik a second time at the Grand Havana Club in New York City on the evening of August 2, 2016. The events leading to the meeting are as follows. On July 28, 2016, Kilimnik flew from Kiev to Moscow. The next day, Kilimnik wrote to Manafort requesting that they meet using coded language about a conversation he had that day. In an email with the subject line Black Caviar, Kilimnik wrote, "I met today with the guy who gave you your biggest Black Caviar jar several years ago. We spent about 5 hours talking about his story, and I have several important messages from him to you. He asked me to go and brief you on our conversation. I said I have to run it by you first, but in principle I'm prepared to do it. It has to do with the future of his country and is quite interesting." End quote. Page 139. Manafort identified, quote, "the guy who gave you your biggest Black Caviar jar" as Yanukovych. He explained that in 2010, he and Yanukovych had lunch to celebrate the recent presidential election. Yanukovych, by the way, is the pro-Russian former president of Ukraine that Paul Manafort helped get elected. Yanukovych gave Manafort a large jar of Black Caviar that was worth approximately $30,000 to $40,000. Manafort's identification of Yanukovych as the guy who gave you your biggest Black Caviar jar is consistent with Kilimnik being in Moscow, where Yanukovych resided, when Kilimnik wrote, "I met today with the guy," and with a December 2016 email in which Kilimnik referred to Yanukovych as BG. The rest of that sentence has been blocked out by Bill Barr. Manafort replied to Kilimnik's July 29 email, "Tuesday, August 2nd is best, Tuesday or Wednesday in New York City." 3 days later, on July 31st, 2016, Kilimnik flew back to Kiev from Moscow, and on that same day wrote to Manafort that he needed about 2 hours for their meeting because it is a long caviar story to tell. Kilimnik wrote that he would arrive at JFK on August 2nd at 7:30 p.m., and he and Manafort agreed to a late dinner that night. Excuse me. Documentary evidence, including flight, phone, and hotel records, and the timing of text messages exchanged, confirms the dinner took place as planned on August 2nd. As to the contents of the meeting itself, the accounts of Manafort and Gates, who arrived late to the dinner, differ in certain respects. But their version of events, when assessed alongside available documentary evidence and what Kilimnik told business associate Sam Patton, indicate that at least three principal topics were discussed. First, Manafort and Kilimnik discussed a plan to resolve the ongoing political problems in Ukraine by creating an autonomous republic in its more industrialized eastern region of Donbass, and having Yanukovych, the Ukrainian president ousted in 2014, elected to head that republic. That would be the part of Ukraine that's mostly Russian-speaking. That plan, Manafort later acknowledged, constituted a backdoor means for Russia to control eastern Ukraine. Manafort initially said that if he had not cut off the discussion, Kilimnik would have asked Manafort in the August 2nd meeting to convince Trump to come out in favor of the peace plan, and Yanukovych would have expected Manafort to use his connections in Europe and Ukraine to support the plan. Manafort also initially told the Mueller office that he had said to Kilimnik that the plan was crazy. It's the Mueller report.